Hey everyone, and welcome to our last Halloween episode for this year. This time we're going to be looking at Kagero Deception 2. And this is its opening cutscene, which is kind of fun, really. It kind of gives you the promise that you're going to be seeing something with more of this, and while it doesn't look great for now, in 1998, it looked pretty good. This game is very 1998 PlayStation. It's just, when I think of this time period, this is the game I think of. Also, don't get too attached to like the emotions and expressions on these characters' faces, because that's going to be gone in the actual game. Which is kind of sad, but you know, whatever. So we got a little girl here. She's looking at a clown, which is always a terrible sign for any game that has a little bit of horror in it. And she gets lured off into a strange place, where she gets raised by a crazy lady and gets turned into a killer and a weapon for the big bad guys. Or at least I think they're the big bad guys. There really are no good people in this game whatsoever. I should point out as well, there are no voice actors in this. And I think I mentioned a little bit later, like the characters reading their lines, I probably should have said the actual writing of their lines. Either way, it sounds like somebody, hit the writer in the head with a brick and he just had to kind of come up with something. Because there's a lot of stuff in this game, even though I love it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense at times. So anyway, here's our main character, Millennia. She will eventually become what I think is like a 20-year-old girl later. Kagero Deception 2 is a game that's really kind of creepy when you look at the story, but don't look at the story too hard, because some of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And a lot of the dialogue kind of feels like the characters have been hit in the head with a brick before being able to read their lines. So most of the game's story is actually told in between the scenes. You don't get too much in the actual battle scenes, and a lot of it is told through in-game graphics. So that very 1998 cutscene, you're not going to get that ever again. That's pretty much gone. And you just get something which, is okay for 98, but now it's not that great anymore. So this is what you get for the rest of the game. You get some creepy music, and you get a bunch of emotionless characters that can't move their faces at all, talking to you through text. So remember that cutscene that was super 1998, didn't look all that great? My god, I would love to have that back. So this is actually from the other plot, from the other game that's happening in this, which I would really love to know more about, but you don't play this game, you play Millennia's game, where she doesn't interact with anything going on in the main story for the most part. She is off in her own little world, which she cannot leave her little buildings that she's in. It sounds kind of dumb, and I know I'm not making it sound too super great, but it's actually a really fun game. So as we saw in that opening cutscene, Millennia gets captured, and she becomes part of something called the Marionette Project. If you'd like more specifics on the Marionette Project, the game gives you a big middle finger because it's not really going to explain too much. It's basically somebody kidnaps, like a human gets kidnapped by the TMD, and they get turned into a killer. We don't know how many times the TMD have done this, how many success stories there are. We just know that Millennia's pretty good at it. We also get to talk a little bit more about Keith here up until you kill him off. Spoilers, by the way. Keith thinks that Millennia is his sister, which might be true. I'll go into that a little bit later. But Millennia is basically just raised to kill off humans, and you don't really get too much more character from her, which is kind of a shame, to be honest. So Millennia can't really fight back at all, What she does is she sets traps in the different rooms, and you try to lure the enemies into those traps. It's kind of sad that you can't fight back, but it sort of adds to some of that tension where if you miss with a trap, you're kind of scrambling to get the hell away from the enemies. So the game makes you use all these different traps, and you can't really just stick with the same ones over and over. Mostly because they do get upgraded, and also you run into some enemies that are just flat out immune to what you're trying to do. Some of the heavier armored enemies are immune to like the arrows. Some of them are able to jump over like the spring floors and other like floor traps. And some of the wall traps don't quite work as well as others. So you kind of have to experiment a little bit to find out exactly what you need to do. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. You don't only just have like your personal traps that you can use, you have like environmental ones as well. So you can set up a lot of combos that will work really, really well. Or you can just kind of trap people in like an endless loop like I've done here with Dead Moon. He's gonna keep getting the spike rock dropped on him, and by the time he gets up to do anything, he's going to hit the spring floor, which will just send him right back into that spiked rock again. I do want to talk a little bit about the enemy types. Some of them are just downright annoying. The two that I hate the most are probably the ninjas and the shadows, and that's just because they don't follow the same rules as the others. A lot of the other enemies, like, your wizards, your knights, your archers, they'll pretty much just walk right into the traps. They're going to follow the same grid, go through the doors, and you're going to be able to take them out pretty easy. But the shadows and the ninjas are able to kind of teleport around, and so you need to figure out how to actually take care of them. It takes a little bit of time, but eventually you figure it out. You'll also encounter at least twice throughout the game, with Dead Moon and also the King at the very end. They can actually regain their health over time. This gets a little annoying, but it's not like an overwhelming challenge that you won't be able to really get through. It can be a little bit hard, but you can do it. And as I mentioned, the game offers a lot of creativity with your traps. It kind of feels a little bit weird at times where you're trying to figure out how best to get people to, show up in a place where they can die as easily as possible. Your first couple playthroughs, you might have a little bit of an issue trying to figure out the right strategy, but once you kind of set up like 3 or 4 rooms where you could just like go in a circle and keep luring people into different spots, it gets a lot easier. As you kill more people off in this, and as you do more damage, you get these things called arcs. Arcs are what you're going to be using to make new traps, and every time you create a new trap, you kind of expand on the different tree that it's in. So, making more wall traps gives you access to better wall traps, same with floor, and same with ceiling traps. This kind of lets you experiment and figure out what you want to do. I honestly recommend, using all of them because it's just going to work a lot easier that way. You'll gain access to a lot of things that you're really going to need and are just going to work out really, really well. With just the wide variety of stuff that you can do, it works out very, very well with all these different things. You can see here, I kind of trapped him in a corner where he tries to walk away and a magnet pulls him into like an electric shock, and also lets me drop a giant ball on his head. Things like that work just exceptionally well for this. Some of the enemies you're going to run into, especially the heavily armored knights, the wall magnets work really well. I've actually seen some of the knights, like the bigger ones, be able to like push the walls back. So if you have like a press wall or the spike wall here, I've seen it where I've hit them with the wall and they've just kind of shoved it back. Or I've seen where the thunderbolt that I have, which is going to come up out of the ground and shock the enemy, I've seen enemies just walk through it like there's nothing there. It's kind of crazy, but it's, it's just kind of lets you do a lot more strategy and a lot of other crazy things with the game. So there's this whole thing going on between the TMD and the humans where some of the humans want to become TMD, or they've been led to believe that. Other humans want to kill off the TMD so that they can kind of be in charge of their own destinies. It's kind of weird, and it's not really explained very well to Millennia. So the main character has no idea what the hell is going on. She's just been told, hey, you're in this castle, people are going to come in, you need to kill them all. It feels like there's a whole nother game happening in the cutscenes, one which I would much rather be seeing. Even though I do like what Millennia's story is, she doesn't really have anything to say about it. Millennia doesn't really talk too much in the game. You get a few instances where you can choose between kind of a more sadistic way of talking, or sort of that like naive, I'm just doing this because it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And you don't really have Millennia expanding on what's going on. She doesn't really reflect on anything. She's just kind of like, yeah, I killed him, or, it wasn't my fault, something along those lines, like these very short snippets. And I think that kind of works because of the way that they structured the story. Like I mentioned, Millennia has no idea what's happening outside of the areas that she's in. Whether it's the castle in the woods, the kind of like the royal palace, or the ruins, she's not aware of anyone's conversations, but you, the player, actually know what's happening, which is kind of weird, but it's also kind of fun at the same time. The game really does tell a story of just manipulation on every level. Every person in here is being manipulated by someone else. The king tends to be the person that's doing the most of it. Also Dead Moon as well, but even Dead Moon has been manipulated at times. It's just very strange to see all of these like power struggles going on, and you as the character are directly impacting them, but you're not really aware of what's happening. I did want to call special attention to this moment, where you have King Eclipse talking to this other guy about another project that's happening. So there's the Marionette Project, which is what Millennia is a part of, and then you've got Vogus here, who's doing something way more insidious than that. He's actually artificially creating what are basically the Time Noids, or the TMD. And it's pretty sick and horrifying, to be perfectly honest, because as you kill these two things, you find out that they're basically humans that have been turned into these weird cyborg abomination things. One of them calls out for its mother after you kill it, and the other one, as we're gonna see, it actually thanks you for killing it. It's kinda crazy. And there are actually other moments like this in the game where Millennia is kind of forced, or really you as the player are forced, to do things that are pretty morally reprehensible. She, has to kill a sick child. You have a mother who's going into the castle in order to find like this cure that apparently the TMD have that would cure her child. And just people are going in here to find things. You Millennia don't have any control over it, but you have to kill them off in order to advance the story. It's really kind of sick and horrifying all at the same time. And then at the end of the game, just to kind of top this all off, depending on the ending that you want, or the ending that you get, Millennia has basically declared that, she is too powerful, and the TMD have to kill her off. So they send Yokel, who is essentially your mom, or your adopted mother, in there to kill you. And Millennia doesn't react at all when she kills off Yokel. It's just sort of like, yeah, yep, that's what happens. And the art style doesn't help too much because, as you see, you just get the strange, sort of porcelain faces. You don't have them having any reaction or any emotion shown on them at all. It's really kind of unsettling, to be honest. But you, as Millennia, you have to kill these people off. And, depending on how you do, you get one of 4 different endings. For me, I usually just get the default ending. There is some perks to it if you get the other endings, and if you get all 4, then you get like some special traps or something like that. For the ending that I got, you kill the king, and the king immediately says that, you destroyed the world. I would like to point out to this incredibly stupid king that if he had just left Millennia alone, he would have outlived her and everything would have been fine. And in fact, that was the plan from the very beginning. The king and a lot of the other TMD were just going to go into hiding and outlive all of the rebels. And that would have been a perfect plan because the TMD have, everlasting life or immortality or some type of immortality. They could just go into hiding and wait for all of the, the mortals to die off. It would have been perfectly fine, but no, the king decides, he's got to take matters into his own hand and go in there and kill Millennia. Which ends about how you would expect. You kill the guy, and then he goes on this incredibly long and stupid speech about how, it's Millennia's fault for this, everybody's going to blame her, blah blah blah. They don't. No one really knows that Millennia existed, and in the default ending, yeah, everything descends into chaos. And no one really realizes that you had any part in it. It's just very weird. Now, the ending to this does tie in a little bit to some of the other Deception games, depending on the one that you get. If you get the right ending, this is when it sort of ties in and you can kind of connect the dots. A demon shows up, which is kind of the point for the other Deception games. This one, I don't know why it's weird and stands out, but it does. But in one of the endings, a demon shows up and curses Millennia to become a Time Noid or a TMD or whatever. And that's kind of how that one ends. She just becomes a Time Noid. It's kind of crazy. But at the end of each one, if you then take that save data and play again, you're able to unlock like a specific trap that's related to some kind of like a demonic power. It'll be like a demon's hand or a demon's foot or something, and it'll do more damage. It's kind of cool, and it gives you a little bit of replay value for this. Tecmo also did one thing that's kind of fun. If you complete all 4, then you get a Monster Rancher attack. It's kind of funny. It's the, I think it's Sazo or something like that. It's the yellow thing that looks like an eye, that has like one giant eye and it uses its tongue to fight. It's really weird for me to try to describe that, but it is kind of a funny thing that they threw that one in here just because it's a Tecmo game and so on and so forth. So yeah, you see here, everything descends into chaos, and, nobody really remembers anything about the TMD. Which makes me think this is probably the canon ending, to be perfectly honest, but I don't think we'll really ever find out.
So that's going to wrap it up, guys. This is one of my favorite games. Even though I've got just so many problems with the story, it's still one of my favorite games. I actually rented this, it had to have been like 98, late 98, early 99, something along those lines. But I remember renting it, not being able to pronounce the name, and having my friend make fun of me for not being able to pronounce the name, which is weird because I don't know how he knew how to pronounce it, but, whatever. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below, and have a happy Halloween, everyone.